Go on then, Peter. Let's talk about the pit stops.
Yes.
Did why do you think McLaren made the decision that they did? Lap 7, it seemed like it was obvious that you've got to get at the very least 2 pit stops out the way. You have to. It's mandated now. Do you think that they didn't do it for fear that they would have to double stack and then infringe upon the progress of one of their drivers, Oscar or Lando? Did they make that decision at the altar of a perceived egalitarianism?
Well, I don't think it was the double stacking thing because Max was between them. So it wasn't as if, Lando was sitting on his tail, and it was, the amount of time he would have lost was so small compared with the time that they did lose by staying out, that I don't think that was a factor. As I said in the video last night, it was quite interesting when Oscar said, "So what's the plan? Are we boxing?" He said, actually, I think Jenks would probably approve of boxing on the basis that it's also a sport. Yeah. Are we boxing or not? And there was sort of silence, an uncomfortable silence for about 4 corners just before turn 17. They said, "No, stay out, stay out." And Oscar went very quiet then. So they did think about it, which is interesting because the evidence is that they didn't even think about it. Now, I don't think you should read too much into it. I think it was just complete and utter rabbits in the headlight and not knowing what to do. And I can't imagine that the 25 lap thing was even in their minds because, as you say, it was obviously a 2-stop race without the pit stop and without the safety car. But at the same time, a free pit stop's a free pit stop. It's a Christmas present. That's much more important than worrying about what the others are going to do and how much flexibility or you may or may not have at the back end of the race. A free pit stop, a Christmas present. Take it. Thank you very much. That was the point. And they didn't, for whatever reason. And when Lando started talking about it, as he correctly should have, he made the point that, okay, they made the call with Oscar to stay out, but wouldn't the right thing then for him, Lando, be to come in, split strategies, and at least see where it's going? That would have been the logical thing. He called him the car in front. Well, I think he was referring to Oscar. He may have been referring to Max. I don't know. And I think he was right. I think he was right to have that thinking, but they didn't do it. They didn't even think about splitting strategy. And I think that's all because of they've got these 2 guys and they don't want to have any discussion after the race about, well, why was he on this strategy? Why wasn't? They've got to keep everything as fair and equal as they possibly can. And I think it's just crossed them up totally. And it was rabbit in the headlights. There was no logic to trying to understand what they did. And I think for Will Joseph to say, the others have lost their flexibility for late in the race. What else he's probably thinking, what is going on here? What can I say to Lando that might just give him some peace of mind?
Yeah. Max has said before the race that he thinks the only reason why the championship's still alive for him isn't because of anything he's done, not his brilliance or Red Bull's strategic nous, but because of things that McLaren haven't done, because of the extent to which they've been dropping the ball and the frequency of it. Is this not a case in point on that, Peter, that Qatar is yet another
example? Really, they should have clinched the championship in Vegas, really. And I'm not saying as it is now, but in terms of the year and the car they had, Lando or Oscar should have been world champion by Vegas. And they managed to get themselves disqualified with both cars there. And now they haven't done it in Qatar either, against all odds. They had a really good car in Qatar, as we know, the best. And I could not imagine when I woke up on Sunday morning how Oscar was not going to win that Grand Prix and Lando was not going to be second. It was just a complete and utter given. And I was ready for a totally boring race. And it wasn't, because something as innocuous as a safety car on lap 7 managed to blindside them. And I still can't get my head around it, to be honest, that they did that. I think, any fan in the grandstand, any fan watching it on TV would have said immediately, bring him in. It's not a clever call. And Red Bull had Hannah up there on the podium, which is a good thing, nice to see her up there. But the reality was, I think that was just Red Bull having her up there saying, yeah, we made the right call. It wasn't a clever call. It's just that remember what you guys did. You know, you messed it up big time. I think that's what her position was there, because the call was made was just a completely normal standard call that everybody else made in the pit lane. You know, no big deal. But McLaren couldn't even do that. And I say it's all due to having to run two cars the way they do and the pressure they're under from one side of the garage and the other now, as predicted. And, you know, Daniel was more mature. He was not much slower than Oscar. And but he would never have beaten Lando over a championship. And he would have been quite happy to have raced that way. I'm convinced of it. And I think it was a great team. It was a great team in the way that, you know, whatever, Lewis and Valtteri were a great team, or Michael and Rubens were a great team, or Michael and Felipe. It was a great team. And they just blew it apart for no reason with this great car on the horizon. And I just still don't get it. And they're paying the price for that now, for sure.
Talk to me, Peter, about Lando, because in your review video, you talked about Lando's communication with his race engineer, where he was asking for help, turn 10, what am I doing? And got some counsel, to which he responded, well, I'm going to need more help than that, because I can't do what you're asking me. Peter, what do you make of a potential champion F1 driver having those sort of conversations in real time with a race engineer?
Not good. Not good. Can you imagine Jackie Stewart, if they had radios in Tyrrell, saying to Derek Gardner, Derek, I got understeer going into Druids. What do you think I should do? You know, it would never happen, would it? And, you're the racing driver, Jackie, you tell me. And they did that. And it was lovely to hear GP on the radio at one point saying, it was to Max, it was something like, you're going to have understeer turn 9, but a bit of oversteer. Anyway, I'll leave that to you, Max. You'll know how to handle that sort of thing, you know. And I just thought, yes, that's exactly the right tone. And but this other thing, I mean, they were frenetic, both sides, you know, both Lando and Will, and it sounded like, you know, well, I mean, if you want a graphic illustration of the difference between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, it is exactly that. I think Lando is so driven now by cross-referencing his telemetry with Oscar's and vice versa. Oscar obviously with Lando, which is why I think he's got very lost over the past 3 or 4 months. And the engineers constantly throwing stuff at Lando about how much he should be off the throttle, off the brakes or not. And it's not time management stuff. It's all to do with how to be quick. Whereas in Max's case, 99% of the instructions are all to do with where he can save the tires or save the fuel. But in Lando's case, it's not. And that is the difference. You know, a lot of the natural feel has gone out of Lando's driving because of that, as it has out of Oscar's driving, I think. And I thought it was interesting after the race that Oscar said something like, you know, I hope to drive, and I'm going to drive like this in Abu Dhabi, as if he's actually discovered something in his driving now that he wishes he had before, and which he's going to take onto Abu Dhabi, some spark. I mean, I'm interested to know what he's thinking in his mind like that, because he's been driving flat out as quickly as he can go the last 4 or 5 races and hasn't been going anywhere. So something obviously changed a little bit in the way he's been using the car. I couldn't see it, to be honest, in terms of the way he drives. I mean, Lando, to me, looked like he was pitching the car more than normal in Qatar. And it looked like he was, just overdriving everywhere. And you saw it with some of the mistakes he was making. And that's a function of not really feeling the surface of the road and relaxing and being calm with supple muscles. It's all tension. And I think that was exacerbated by a lot of what was going on in the pit wall.